Welcome to Hochoka Podcast.
Hello, Mitakiyepi. Welcome to Hochoka, here at the center of St. Joseph's Indian Schools campus. I'm Scott Wooster, today's Hochoka host. We're glad you have joined our circle to welcome back St. Joseph's Indian Schools Native American Studies lead, Lorraine Wooster. She's here to tell you about the school's 7th grade cultural trip. Welcome back to the studio.
Thank you.
Good to have you here in Hochoka.
Absolutely.
So this is one of my favorite things to talk about. I was pretty excited to have you in the studio. One, because you're my wife, and two, because this topic is going to be so much fun to talk about. And I know that it's a passion for you. You've done it for 15 years, but it remains a passion for you, and it's definitely a labor of love to be able to do this for these kids. And so it'll be fun to hear what you have to say about it. So can you just tell us how this trip came about?
In 2006, we had a cultural advisory committee, and a couple of former house parents had an idea to take their homes out of state, because at that time, if you went on a home trip, you had to stay in state. Mm-hmm. And so they wanted to go up to North Dakota and wanted to market it as a cultural trip, going to Fort Buford and seeing some different sacred sites that are up in North Dakota. And so we got together as a cultural committee and said, hey, why don't we do this with girls and boys and teach them some things and take them on the same trip but separate them, which is the way things were done back in the day when they were taught their roles to be Wikoshkalaka, a young woman, and Koshkalaka, a young man. You separated them, and they were taught different things by different specific people. So the girls learned from the grandmas and their aunties. Mm-hmm. And so we had an extensive talk about this with Father Steve. And he said, let's make it a trip. Let's send you guys out. And he was in full support of it. So we decided we would embark on our very first cultural trip. And we did that after school was out, and some of the kids didn't want to go on the trip because they wanted to go home.
It's summer.
Yeah, mm-hmm. Absolutely. So over the years, it has changed, but that's how it began in its infancy.
Can you give us some idea of what kind of planning goes into, and to full disclosure, I know what planning goes into it because I watch you do it for many months leading up to the trip. But for our viewers who aren't aware, can you give them insight into what this looks like?
Right. Now we look back. What do we want to change? Mm-hmm. Look at our itinerary. What was good? What can we tweak? And I say every year, I don't know how we could make this trip any better. Mm-hmm. But I have a change for next year, and, just little things here and there. But we start with an itinerary. I have a couple of elders that we make sure the kids meet when we go out. And so I contact them. Does this date work for you? Because we're going to work our trip around seeing you. It's that important to have the kids see some elders and hear stories from them. And then we find a place to stay, and it has evolved from camping out on the ground under the stars to now we rent a VRBO for many reasons, but we stay in one place and we do day trips out from our houses from there. So then the itinerary is made. We talk with the kids. The pre-teaching happens in the classroom where we say, you guys are getting to embark on this cultural trip where you're going to get to go out and see and walk in the footsteps of Crazy Horse and your ancestors and feel what it was like to stand there, be there, listen to things. And at the beginning of that, they are Oh, okay. And I tell them, this is a trip of a lifetime. Your families probably would love to do this, but we're going to take you on this, and then you're going to be the teachers. Some pre-teach questions, have you been to any of these places? I let the kids share and teach. Some of them have been there and they know background stories about it. So, they become the teachers as well. And ask them, likes, dislikes, and pair them. Yeah, you've seen the planning that goes into it, but it's a family vacation in a cultural setting, and we have a lot of fun.
And then there are the other little logistical things with renting vehicles, making sure you have the right credit cards, you're obtaining receipts, you have your budget for it, all those little things that come into play with that trip too. And there's so much to think about, I think.
Phone numbers, details, meals, snacks, water bottles, backpacks, medicines.
Phone chargers, making sure the lifelines are plugged in.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yep. And our kids do get to take their phones, and then they're without them for certain times too. And we have times when, all I have to say is, can you put your phones away? And the kids are respectful and understand, but they get to listen to their own music, when they want to, and take their own pictures. They can share those pictures with me and then use them in their presentations when they come back to the school. So yeah, we have multimedia things around us, and it's a very quaint, meaningful trip that creates some. It cements relationships with them. You build relationships. They find different relationships from being in a classroom and a home with these girls, where you really are together 4 to 5 nights and 5 to 6 days, day in, day out, and your relationships change and grow and cement, and you learn a little bit more about each other, and it's awesome.
Yeah, the trip works on so many different levels, culturally, socially, all sorts of things.
Right.
So you do all this planning long before the trip ever starts. The day before, we were fortunate enough to be able to take these kids, 7th grade boys and 7th grade girls, to have separate NEP ceremonies to pray and to prepare them for the trip. And then in this case, this year, we met on a Wednesday. Thursday morning, we met bright and early in front of the homes at 8 o'clock and built a circle, and then it was go time. Where does it go from there? Where are you traveling? Because we're left behind. We don't see where you go.
Right. We start our trip in different directions. So the boys go a different direction and the girls go a different direction. We end up seeing all these same places, and we cross paths twice.
Okay.
So for the girls, we started out and we took our route through the Badlands and just talked about what that meant to our people in the past and the medicines that are in there, that it was a hiding place for some families when kids were supposed to be at school. Families maybe would go in there. It was a rugged terrain to travel through, but medicines were in there. And that today it's our modern day playground, and we can learn so much from it. And then we go to Wounded Knee massacre site and talk about the importance and sacredness of that. And we learn about all these places ahead of time, but actually going there, you see light bulbs go on where they go, oh, this is the place. And we watch a video about Lost Bird of Wounded Knee, who was a baby who was taken from the battlefield. And actually, she has a connection to St. Joe, where when this ground was a government boarding school, she attended school here. Not when it was St. Joseph's Indian School, but the government boarding school. And that's written about in a book. And so that connection makes them feel, the realities of life too. And then her grave is there because she passed away in California, and then her body was brought back. And so we talk about the laws that we have today about adopting kids and fostering children and all of those things. But her life, how it was very difficult. But she got to come home. And so the kids walk around and read names, and, they usually ask the question, why is it this way? One of the boys went around and picked up the flowers that had blown around and gone off the graves, and he felt good about putting them back. And I say, I came here for the first time, and I thought, these are Oglala people, but they're not. They're people from all over who were ghost dance followers and were massacred and ended up being buried here. And so it's not anybody's one responsibility to take care of that place. And so the kids always kind of have that feeling of, who takes care of this, and why is it here? Why isn't there more organization and beautification, I think, with it? So we talk about those kind of things of what are you going to do in the future? From there, we go to our creation story down in Wind Cave. And, we've had a couple of exhibits at the museum of that. So they've heard that story a couple times. But actually, again, just being there and seeing it, they have questions. And then we, talk about the scientific part of Wind Cave and the other caves that are around there. But I think what really drives home with the girls and the boys there is the creation story, that the hole was shrunken and we're not supposed to try to go back in. We're living on this earth, and, you make the best of it. And all along these places, we make prayer ties. And when they feel like there's an important or significant place to tie a prayer tie somewhere, so it goes back to that prayerful spiritual connection of those places. And from there, the next day, we both travel to Little Bighorn Battlefield in Montana. So we go through Wyoming, and we talk about the battle, drive along the whole site and listen to what happened on this side and what happened on the Lakota Cheyenne side versus the cavalry side. And now there's an Indian memorial there, so we can go and they can see names of their ancestors and the people who fought. But the story of Crazy Horse being there, I tell the women, here's your part. The women actually fought off Custer because he was coming down into the encampment to steal the women and the children, and that was his way of being able to get the men to give up. And I say, it was you guys. It was the women who were the strong part of this that fought him off, and then that caused everything to change. And our warriors surrounded him on Last Stand Hill, and the rest is history. But I encourage the kids all along the way to find importance in their role. What would you, if you had lived back then, what would your role have been? Yeah. And from Little Bighorn, Mato Tipila is on the way there, which also is known as Devil's Tower. And so we walk around there, and there are lots and lots of questions about that. And they're so inquisitive of just about everything. Can we climb it? Can we? Well, it's disrespectful to climb it. And, the story Devil's Tower was not our name. We called it Mato Tipila. There are stories from different tribes about that place. But the Sundance used to take place there, and then the town of Sundance, Wyoming is near there. So we talk about names of places. Everything is educational. And so as we're driving in our bus, there are points to point out where Crazy Horse had the 100 in the Hand or the Fetterman massacre or battle. And so that's also in Joseph Marshall's book, and he referenced that. So we talk about how Crazy Horse and all of everything is connected. So when we talk to the elder Ben Rod on Peshla in the middle of the Black Hills, he's telling us Crazy Horse came here and learned how to be a warrior. And he watched the mole and the dragonfly and the tort and the lizard. And so when we talk about what Crazy Horse did, One of his tactics was he moved and crisscrossed with another warrior, and that was the symbol for the other warriors to come and attack. And that makes sense to them, so they can see it. So that's another place along that route that we see and in the bus point it out and talk about it. And then the girls actually this year a couple times said, can we have our books to take notes? Because after we're at every place, we take notes, and then they can use that for their presentation when they return. From there, the trip splits a little bit, and the boys, on the first day, they hike Bear Butte. And then we come back, and on Saturday, we met with Ben Rod, and he is the caretaker of Peshla, which is the center of the Black Hills, the center of the nation. And his talk with the kids is, it just can't be done by anybody else. Mm-hmm. It's so important to meet him there. And he has a different story every year. I learn something different from him, right. I feel like, every year. So we were with him for about 3 hours. And he tells the kids all the stories from around where the girls were taught on the Turtle Hill and the boys are taught in the Lizard area. And then Peshla is where they can both come together. And the history there, he's an archaeologist. So he has facts of hearths that were found 9,000 years ago where teepees were there, and pieces of bones and teeth were found that are connected to our people. So it's good for the kids to hear, our culture is not 50 years old. It's not it's 9,000. There's proof here that it's 9,000 years old. And so from there, we visit Crazy Horse Memorial and talk about how heroes of ours can be in the center of the hills too. And we visit Bear Butte and hike there and listen to either Jim Jandrew, who is a former student of St. Joseph's Indian School. He's he's in charge of that park, the ranger there. Another elder from Oglala works there, and he tells the kids, hiking is a prayer. You go up Bear Butte and you stop 4 times, and everything in life is a journey. So it helps them understand that we're not just hiking for exercise or to see how fast we can do it. It's a prayer and it's a journey. And then on the way home, the boys went back through where we went on the first day. So they went to Wounded Knee and through the Badlands and came home. And before you know it, you're off and planning another.
So they come back with all this knowledge. And you come back with all this knowledge because it's new for you every year, because the makeup of the group just makes that trip so much different each year, I would imagine. What do you do with that knowledge, at least immediately when you return?
So preparing for that, reading In the Footsteps of Crazy Horse was one of the things we changed about this year. So the kids read this. They got to meet Joseph Marshall the day before we left. And in computer class, they create a skeletal slide presentation. And within there are people we met. So Joseph Marshall III is one of the people that the kids listed that they met. And I reference, you are literally walking in the footsteps of Crazy Horse along with this. They're taking notes. So we come back with all this information, and we returned on Monday evening. Tuesday, we sat in a classroom with them all day long from 8:30 until 3:10, and they could not believe that they were going to work all day on this presentation. Right. So we've taken pictures, and they insert a picture, and in the notes, they write what they want to share. And that has all evolved as well. So before, they would list facts, and we would give them a very structured slide to use. And this year I said, I just want to hear about your experience. This year, your experiences were really, they were just amazing. And so that just a little change of that every year. Show a picture, tell me about your place. And I walked up Black Elk Peak with one of the boys, and he talked up and down the whole way. And he was probably the one student that was the most scared to do a presentation. And finally, I just said, "You're doing your presentation to me right now. You're talking to every person we meet, and you're telling me things. This is your presentation." And he ended up doing really great. So they come back with this knowledge. They do a presentation, share, role model to the kids who are coming up for the trip next year, and create questions within the other kids. What is this trip? When do I get to go? So we come back with suggestions, and I ask them, what would make your trip better? And honestly, the boys couldn't tell me a thing that would make the trip better. One of the girls said, such and such place was kind of boring. And that's good for me to say, okay, I need to spice that up a little bit. And what can I do more to make that more fulfilling, or make a better connection with them on that place? But that was about the only thing they said too. So it was a great trip.
When they graduate in 8th grade, all of the kids during their graduation ceremony are asked, what is your favorite memory from the school or from the homes at St. Joe's? And I'm telling you, you know this, I'm telling our audience that almost to a person, they all indicate that this trip was the best part, the 7th grade cultural trip. You hear it from so many of them, and that's just how special this trip has become. You've been on 15 of them. Are there any special memories that you have, just maybe one that you can tell us about that just meant a lot to you?
This year was, there are many.
Of course.
But this year, in connection with Ben Rod, we were able to get an explanation about some things that happened on the trip. And one of them was the boys hiked to the top of Bear Butte, and it was beautiful and clear, which it is many years. And a cloud comes over us, or there's fog, and the fog lifts. And this year, the boys were at the top, and a cloud came over, and it actually sleeted on them. And we have a picture of them to prove it. And so Trond, the boys' leader this year, asked Ben. He explained that to him, and he said, "Do you have an explanation for that?" And then something happened, and Ben didn't get to finish the explanation. So I texted him and asked him. He immediately replied back and said, "You were blessed by the spirits and the ancestors, and that is a blessing. They enveloped you in that cloud. But when the sleet came, those are the adversities in life, and you're going to have those. But you've been cleansed, you've been shown adversity, and take this and go." And it was just an awesome explanation, and I don't think any of the boys will ever forget that, or the adults, and maybe even the people who heard the stories in the presentation. I certainly won't, but it was good to have that connection with Ben and have him explain that, and the kids will be able to take that and teach it to other people when they take that hike, because I always say, you guys have had this trip now, bring your families, come do this. And that was a connection there.
Right.
But yeah, there are many. We could go on and on about special events and memories that I have, but that's this year's big thing.
Right. And that is something that you can't teach in the classroom, which I think is part of what's so special about this trip. So I know at St. Joe's we're so thankful to have this trip, the cultural trip every year. The kids are, their families are, staff is, the donors are proud to see that. And so I know you learn a lot from the kids on the trip too, because it works both ways. It's just that kind of relationship. But it's a lot of work for you, and it is a labor of love. And we're thankful, very thankful that you do that every year for these kids. It means so much to all of us. So thank you, Lorraine.
Yeah, I'm honored to do it.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for being here with us to tell us about it in Hochoka today as well.
Absolutely.
And thank you to our viewers as well for joining us here in Hochoka at the center of St. Joseph's Indian Schools campus, where we talk about issues central to Native American education today. Until next time, stay centered.